Did you disconnect before I sat down trying to get
Good evening, everybody. I just want to give you a nice friendly warning that we're live on Facebook right now. So, you know, we probably can't hear what you're saying, but you just never know.
I figured, but I was trying to.
I'm going to call the meeting to order. Would everybody rise and say the pledge, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Just a nice friendly warning, everybody. We're live on Facebook. So for those of you that just arrived, we don't think that they'll be able to hear you, but just in case, there's your nice warning, okay? Welcome to the Union City Community Schools Board meeting. Our meeting agenda is available for you to follow. The expectation for our board meeting is to follow this agenda closely. We operate under the Open Meetings Act and utilize Robert's Rule of Order to govern our discussion and decision-making process. There's an opportunity for public comment during our set agenda. We welcome the public to express their opinions during this time of our agenda. If there are questions about the agenda or the board meeting process, please seek out one of the board members for clarification. Do we have any additions or deletions of items to the agenda? Okay. This is the section of the meeting in which the public may make comments to share their opinions about the agenda items. We ask you to limit your comments to no longer than 5 minutes per person to allow others the opportunity to speak. This is an opportunity for the board to listen to your concerns. It's not board practice to act on the concerns voiced during this meeting to allow for the board to do further research. Do we have anybody who'd like to make a public comment? Okay. Who wants to go first? When you get up to the podium, will you share your name, but will you also turn on the microphone? And then these things are a little bit tricky. If you turn your head, people can't hear you as well. And what we've heard from online is if you would speak right into the microphone, that they can hear us online as well.
Test, test.
Check 1, 2.
Good evening. My name is Jessica Lane and I am the parent of 3 little chargers, ages 10, 8, and 5. I felt compelled to come and speak tonight after seeing our school's back-to-school plan last month on Facebook. I was surprised and disappointed in the plan because it does not provide any real protection to our students and staff members who are not vaccinated against COVID-19. My children are all elementary age and unable to receive a vaccine at this time, and I am devastated that they are expected to go to school with unvaccinated and potentially unmasked classmates. I also felt the need to come and speak because I know there has been a vocal group in opposition to masks and safety measures that the school put in place last year. I felt that it was time for the board to know that group does not speak for the entire community. Just because they have been the loudest voices doesn't mean they are the only voices. Our back-to-school plan looks like a plan you would see pre-COVID or even post-COVID. Masks will be recommended but not required, and while that may seem like a good decision to some, it is not the smart and safe decision for our unvaccinated students. The back-to-school plan also fails to account for the inevitable presence of COVID in our district. There is no contingency plan for how to proceed if we have positive staff and/or students, if we need to shut down school, or how to implement a virtual plan. The failure to give full consideration to the presence of COVID-19 in our district is not only disappointing but potentially dangerous. I wish COVID was a thing of the past as much as the next person, but unfortunately that is not the case. The Michigan Department of Health and Human Services has a Return to School Safely plan that involves returning to in-person learning while implementing multiple layers of defense against the spread of COVID-19. The MDHHS states schools can layer multiple prevention strategies to prevent transmission within school buildings, reduce disruptions to in-person learning, and help protect the people who are not fully vaccinated, which currently includes all children under the age of 12. The layers of defense include promoting vaccination for eligible staff and students, consistent mask wearing, implementing physical distancing and cohorting, promoting screening and testing for illnesses, and providing healthy environments with adequate ventilation. According to the MDHHS, as vaccination rates go up in each school building, there will be fewer opportunities for COVID-19 to spread within that building. Unfortunately, for all elementary buildings, the vaccination rate will remain extremely low until those students under 12 are able to get vaccinated. Like the MDHHS, the Centers for Disease Control and the American Academy of Pediatrics recommend that in-person instruction is best. They advise that all staff and students wear a mask regardless of vaccine status. While I believe that getting vaccinated and universal masking are the main tools we have to control COVID, I also know that not everyone shares those beliefs. At the very least, our district needs to think about our unvaccinated elementary students who are unvaccinated not by choice, but because they don't even have the opportunity yet. With a potential compromise in mind, I would love to see the elementary building implement a mask policy for all unvaccinated students and staff. The middle and high school buildings could continue on with the current plan of voluntary masking since the majority of those staff and students have had the opportunity to get a vaccine. Since this situation is fluid, the mask policy at the elementary building could continue to be monitored and adjusted as the positivity rate goes down and vaccines become available to elementary age students. Teachers and administrators also agree that in-person learning is best for all students. My kids powered through last year, almost completely virtual, and I'm so thankful we had that option. But what is best for my kids now is to go back to in-person learning. They deserve to be at school just as much as anyone else, but they also deserve to go back safely. Since the start of COVID, my family has adjusted to what we do in our everyday lives, but school is not optional. We are required to send our kids to school, but I think it is wrong and unfair to just expect me to put my kids into a precarious situation. While a mask may be an inconvenience, it is not harmful to anyone. My husband wore a mask for sometimes 12 hours a day for over a year. Was it annoying sometimes? Yes, but that is it. Surgeons have been wearing masks for years while they perform long surgeries with no issues. Some may argue that if you want your kid to wear a mask, they can, but don't ask my kid to mask. We all know that masks work best when everyone is wearing one, and my kid wearing a mask helps other students more than it helps them. I've heard from board members and our superintendent that having an optional mask requirement is what other schools in the area are doing. Therefore, the decision to proceed with that requirement here is the right call. As a parent with kids that go to Union City schools, I am not concerned with what other districts are doing. The old saying is true that just because someone else is doing it doesn't make it the right decision. If you don't want to have a mask requirement because you just don't want to do it, let that be your reason. Don't act like your hands are tied and that you don't have the ability to make decisions or influence the decision-making process. Whether you are an elected official or an administrator, you are here to serve the community and make the best decisions for our district. Our community needs you to consider the effect that COVID-19 could have on our health, finances, and education. The right thing to do is right, not because it is always popular, but because it is right. I am disappointed that I have to implore my superintendent and board members to consider the health and safety of my unvaccinated kids over the convenience of no masks. I am asking my fellow community members, some I have known my entire life, to help keep my kids safe. If I could do it alone, I would, but I need your help. Together, all of our kids can go back to school with minimal inconveniences and have an in-person learning experience that is safe and amazing. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your attention. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Nicole DeGraff. I have practiced as a primary care physician assistant at ProMedica Union City Family Medicine Clinic for over 15 years. I've been a PA for 19 years this month. I am also the parent of 3 children who have attended Union City schools since kindergarten, first as school of choice and now as a Union City Village resident for the last 16 months. I would like to take a moment of your time to share my perspective of working in this community throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. I want to be clear. I wholeheartedly reject claims that COVID-19 is just another flu. I worked here in 2009 when the H1N1 flu epidemic hit our community. Up to that point in my career, I had never treated so many ill men, women, and children all sick at the same time. And yet, at the end of that epidemic, I did not lose a single patient. In contrast, several patients I have treated have died of COVID-19 in this community. It is true, many patients with COVID-19 have had mild cold or flu-like symptoms, but sadly, many others are seriously ill and face prolonged hospitalizations, loss of time at work. Still others have been left with long-term health problems, such as shortness of breath, fatigue, and concentration difficulties. I can't tell them when they're going to be better. I have taken late-night phone calls from patients terrified when they suddenly can't breathe, and consoled families as they dropped off loved ones at the ER, fearing they would never see them again. I share this because I hope you will understand that I feel compelled now to do everything in my power to keep this dangerous and unpredictable virus from hurting any more of our neighbors, friends, and family. I want to commend Union City Community Schools for going above and beyond in the 2021 school year to balance the health of our students and staff with their mission to educate our children. Our teachers worked long, hard hours to prepare both virtual and in-person lessons. Our administrators provided steady leadership during the most turbulent of times. I had a unique vantage point in being able to observe and assist in tracing some of the positive COVID-19 cases that impacted our schools, thanks to effective control measures, including masking, ventilation, cleaning, distancing, testing, and quarantine measures. Very few COVID cases were contracted inside of our school, but instead were spread from social gatherings outside the school. However, I think we can all agree that despite our best efforts, the periods of time we were engaged in virtual learning left far too many of our at-risk students behind. As a healthcare provider, I also greatly value the importance of children's mental health, and I support the return to in-person, 5-day-a-week instruction. I am struggling, however, to understand why at this critical moment, when we are finally coming back together to learn, we would abandon the most effective infection control tool we have against COVID-19, which is universal masking. Medical practitioners accept studies that have shown that when every person in a room wears a mask, there is 96% protection against the transmission of COVID-19. If some people in a room choose not to mask, then a mask wearer is only protected from COVID-19 by 50%. That is why it is simply not effective to prevent COVID-19 spread when only some people in the school choose to mask and others do not. It is true that many children infected will have mild symptoms, or even no symptoms at all. There is growing concern, however, that as the virus mutates, some children could face prolonged illnesses or even hospitalization. Also, if we allow our children to spread COVID-19 to each other, many children will miss school for quarantine periods. Furthermore, when these COVID infections occur, entire families will be forced to quarantine for periods up to 20 days. Without universal masking, other non-COVID infections, such as the common cold and the flu, will spread much more rapidly within our school. This will also lead to loss of classroom time, as children miss school to be tested to rule out COVID, as well as to recover. As COVID and non-COVID infections spread to our teachers and staff, we will have to rely heavily on substitute teachers, of which we still do not have enough supply. It is difficult enough for working families to coordinate childcare, especially when schools cancel, and I'm sure none of us look forward to extending the school year next summer due to frequent cancellations due to sub-coverage issues. At the end of the day, I feel strongly we will struggle to keep our schools open consistently if everyone in the school doesn't mask. What will we have achieved in getting our school back to normal if we can't keep the school open? As many of you have seen in the news in the last few days, Branch County is recently considered a hotspot for the much more infectious COVID-19 Delta variant, as infectious as chickenpox. Over this past weekend, the CDC presented data that the Delta variant can infect vaccinated people, who can then spread it to others. It is true, vaccinated people will have milder infections than the unvaccinated, but they can still spread COVID-19 to their friends and families. In this current phase of the pandemic, in this community, even our vaccinated teachers and staff members can no longer count on being fully protected from getting COVID-19. I also fear that if we do not universally mask at school, our mostly unvaccinated student body will spread COVID to the Union City community, especially given the fact that we only have a 36% vaccination rate in Branch County at this time. The risk of a Union City community member contracting COVID-19 is greater than 68% of all other communities across the United States. Our community cannot afford for this risk to rise even higher because of the actions of our schools. As a public school system, I believe we have an obligation to support our community. It is irresponsible to bring harm to our neighbors when the science proves that we can cut down on COVID-19 spread with just the small sacrifice of wearing masks. I want to share with you that as parents, my husband and I have chosen not to keep our children under lock and key in the name of COVID safety. Instead, we have encouraged safer activities when possible for our children, including outdoor sports and vacations centered around nature. We have continued to practice our Catholic faith by attending a parish with a universal masking mandate. We vaccinated ourselves and our 13-year-old daughter. We plan to vaccinate our 9-year-old twins as soon as it becomes available for them. We feel strongly that it is possible to live a full life during the pandemic while not sacrificing the safety of others. We are deeply disappointed that if we choose to have our 9-year-olds attend our public school in a few weeks, they will likely contract COVID-19 under the current return to school plan. If you are familiar with my family, then you know how much we love the Union City community. I have witnessed the tremendous outpouring of support and love from neighbors helping each other in times of need. We moved here in part because of this community spirit. The CDC, the American Pediatric Association, and the health department have recommended universal masking in our schools. At this time, the health department has not mandated universal masking, but instead has left this decision in our hands as a community. I feel that in abandoning universal masking, we are missing an opportunity to show kindness to our neighbors by helping to prevent further death and suffering. We are missing an opportunity to teach our children the value of making small sacrifices for the good of others. We are missing the opportunity to give our schools the most powerful tool they need to stay open and to thrive this year. I am asking the school board and the superintendent to reconsider our current stance on the abandoning of universal masking in the school as proposed in the current return to school plan. Instead of insisting on complete abandonment of universal masking, I urge you to consider mandating masks until our county positivity rate and vaccination rate approach safer levels and vaccines become available for all of our students. As much as we all desperately want to return to normal life, the COVID-19 pandemic will not end simply because we decide we are tired of fighting it. Let's use this moment to unite as a community and finish this fight together. Let's not rest until all of our friends, neighbors, and family are safe. Thank you for your time.
Anybody else?
Hello, and thank you all for everything you do for our district. My name is Megan Burgett, and I know you all know I have 7 children. So I have 2 short, quick points for you. Number 1, since the pandemic started, the biggest concern that we have had is that we don't know the medical history of 4 of the children that live in our home. And while we could get through this just fine, at the end of the day, we have no idea what their underlying conditions are, which leads me to my second point. We are proud to be a trauma-informed district. But when we talk about that and we think about that and we really think about who we have here, they can't handle more trauma. And if somebody takes COVID home and their parent loses their job or is hospitalized, has bills that they can't pay, or even dies, that's another trauma to a child in our district or multiple children in our district. And I just think that as a teacher, I wanted to stand up here and say, I will do what I'm asked. And I will do it with a smile on my face like I do every day when I walk into this building. But if keeping our children safe isn't priority number 1, then I kind of question why we give 120% every day when we come in here. They are what matters to us, and their families matter to us. So please take these thoughts into consideration. Thank you.
Anybody else?
My name's Jill McCombs, and I am a school employee, and I would just like to say this community, ages 12 and up, they've all had a chance to get a vaccine. So 12 and under, it isn't available yet. Please consider masking. All lives matter in this district. And the message it sends to me, and it would certainly send to me as a parent, that you're not really concerned about my child's safety. And we're all here for our children, their safety, and their education. Please reconsider this for the sake of our children in this community.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. We're going to move on to our action items. Board action is required to approve the letter of agreement for wages for the 21-22 school year as part of the UCEA MEA teacher contract as presented. Can I have a motion? Thank you. Support. Thank you. Any discussion? I would just like to say how quickly and smoothly I heard that the process went from Superintendent Katz, and I really appreciate everyone working together to quickly resolve this. Okay, that being said, all those in favor of approving the agreement, the letter of agreement, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, thank you. Coaching recommendation. Board action is required to approve the fall coaching recommendations as presented. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you.
Support.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Just a question. We still don't have a JV football coach, correct? An assistant, a volunteer, head coach for JV.
One position still, yes.
Thanks.
Anything else?
Just want to thank everyone that I know coaching isn't highly paid, so I just wanted to say thanks to everyone that is willing to do that this time. It's tough.
Absolutely. Okay, all those in favor of approving the fall coaching recommendations, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Middle school teacher hiring. Board action is required to approve Lacey Johnson as a middle school teacher. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Support. Thank you. Discussion?
I've known Lacey a long time, and I think she's a great addition to our district.
Okay, all those in favor of approving Lacey, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. High school teacher hiring. Board action is required to approve Abby Miller as a high school English teacher. Can I please have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
All right, thank you.
Keep it going.
Listen, I'm doing my best.
Jen's not here to do it, so it's you and me now.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of approving the hiring of Abby Miller, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Excellent. Mr. Katz, we are on to discussion items, weighted grades.
This discussion item was requested by a board member, I believe, to be added. And so we have looked into it, and you have a memo which discusses it. Basically, the idea being to weight grades for Math Science Center students. Some districts, actually many districts, do this for their students. Union City has never done this. I do remember this topic has come up more than once over the years. Most of the districts that do this will give a grade point of 5 for A, 4 for B, etc. So in the past, one of the downsides, so to speak, or the opposing views is that students who aren't inclined to pursue math or science, who are still in our school district here, would lose out on the opportunity perhaps to compete for things like valedictorian, because they would not be able to get a grade point above 4, while the students at the Math Science Center potentially could. So there is a compromise that I proposed in there as one option, which would be to cap the grade point assigned at 4. So students receiving a B or an A at the Math Science Center would get 4 points. That way the highest grade point average a student could have, whether they go to Math Science Center or attended all their classes here locally, would be a 4.0. That would put them on the same footing as far as being able to get that average. But it's on this discussion for the board tonight for all of you to determine what direction you would like to go, and then we will, if you would like to implement that at all, we'll bring something back to act on at the next meeting.
Really, 2 reasons why people want that. One is the valedictorian, you mentioned. The other is scholarships at universities. And I don't know enough to know if an admissions person looks at a transcript and says this person was in the Math and Science Center and got this grade, that should be weighted higher or not. I don't know if that precludes people from being admitted to different colleges, you know, if they can look at that level of detail or not. You know the answer to that question, or how do we find that out?
Look, I think what you're saying is, are admissions representatives at the college level able to tell that a student took a really rigorous path by going to the Math and Science Center? Is that your question?
That, and also those that look at scholarship potential.
Absolutely.
They do look at, they're actually these days much more likely to look at what courses you took than what your grade point is. That's really where their focus is. Even on scholarships, there are some automatic scholarships that universities offer at specific grade point levels, but those are generally at lower levels. When you start getting up to where you're talking about people that are at or near 4 point, they're very much going to pay attention to what courses you took, because it makes a huge difference. Some people are able to get high grade point averages basically by avoiding all the difficult courses.
And that's what I was going to say, is that this levels the playing field a little more, not just for valedictorian or salutatorian, but also for grade point average, which still is being looked at by colleges, and it's still something to strive for by individual students. And it would encourage more people to take more challenging courses, because they're not going to be hurt by taking that course, because they can still get a 4.0. So for that reason, at least at this particular point, unless I hear something different, I would favor that avenue, just to level the playing field and encourage students to be more challenged in the school. Thank you.
You recommend that you're talking about the cap at 4 or the 5.0 option?
either way would do it. Either solution is a solution. I have no particular preference. Either one is going to challenge students. And I know schools that do use a 5, a meter 2. And I also know schools that use the same system as you're talking about. So it's half a dozen of one or 6 of the other as far as I'm concerned.
One thing that having the 5 option does is it potentially allows students to go to the Math Science Center and get, when they get a 5, in 3 or 4 or 5 classes, they could be back here and get a B in other classes, and they would still have above a 4 point or at a 4 point. By capping it, you would encourage those students to maintain their grades in all of their subjects, not just math and science.
It does add more competition though, because all of a sudden you have people that are at least qualifying for salutatorian and valedictorian with 4.6, 4.7, competing with each other. There's advantages and disadvantages to both. One advantage of that basically only affects 2 people. There's 2 or 4 people that are striving for valedictorian and salutatorian, where the other one would challenge the entire student body, realizing they would have a chance to get a 4 point. I mean, I don't have a preference. I just thought I'd throw that out.
Will you use that microphone and see if it works, Jen?
How many kids do we send in Math and Science Center? A few in each grade, correct? Potentially.
It changes, but yeah, a few in each grade, up to 8, generally that number.
Yeah,
I don't know the exact number right now. Amber, would you know exactly how many we have right now or here?
That's fine.
There are 6 8th graders that qualified this year. I don't know if they've all accepted. So the last couple of years, we had 6 that qualified, but not all of them have accepted it.
If we're asking for opinions, I do think we need to reward hard work and reward risks that are taken by students. If I were to pick one, I think that the 4 point cap is the most logical, because that does eliminate the my child excels better in English and in history or whatever instead of math and science. So I think that would be a logical outcome, a fair way to go.
Yeah, the last time we discussed this, Darren, I don't know if you remember this, but I think it's been 2 years maybe that we talked about this. I think it was Amber and Stacy that brought a recommendation. It might have been Christina. There were going to be losers. If we decided that we wanted to do the 5-point scale from the Math and Science Center, there were going to be students that were harmed in that decision. And so we decided, instead of opening a can of worms where there was going to be a loser, to just keep the policy that we had in place for, how long has this policy been? 30 years?
As long as we've got a Math Science Center.
Okay.
It's been since the early 90s.
So then there was also the conversation about, well, if you're gonna weight those classes, do you weight dual enrollment courses? And there were AP courses that you can take through Michigan Virtual. So I mean, it just became a really sticky position. And so we just decided to keep it as is. But I think that this is a good compromise in that it helps the students who want to challenge themselves, and I would imagine that we could even extend this 5-point scale if you decided to take a virtual AP course through Michigan Virtual as well. So you're actually encouraging students to stretch themselves. So I get a B, but I still end up with a 4 point, so it doesn't hurt my chances of being valedictorian. And let's not mince words here. There are huge scholarships if you are class rank number 1. You get full tuition at many different universities, so that is a big deal.
Is there any consideration of the TC, AC, NC, floating TC system?
No.
I just wondered. Just like that.
As soon as you get the colleges to adopt that, they will.
So I'm going to lose that vote.
Hypothetically speaking, if we do institute a 4-point cap where you do get a 4 point even though you get a B in certain classes, how would we institute that in terms of deciding which, like we talked about AP versus math and science, how do we actually execute that?
Well, that is something we would have to work out. We would have to come up with a process, some criteria that we would use to decide that. And that would be something that we would discuss and prepare before we get back in 2 weeks with an option for you, if that is something you want us to consider.
I would be all for the different grading system and capping it, like you had discussed. The only thing that I would also include in that is dual enrollment, because kids who are taking college courses are putting in just as much work as kids that go to Math and Science Center, and I think that they should be rewarded for that as well.
Anybody else? All right, we can try.
So it sounds like there's interest for this. We put it on the next board meeting as an action item.
Yeah, I will. If you're all, seems to be of the same mind, we'll put it on as an action item, and I'll come back with an actual proposal that you can look at and choose from and take action.
I also don't want you to feel rushed though, because if we can't deal with this until September, I would be comfortable saying, okay, we didn't make the decision until September, but it still can impact the fall grading, because that won't be done until December. Is that when your semester ends, or January? So, yeah, so if you feel like you'd like a little bit more time than that,
Right now, I'd like a little bit more time for a lot of
okay.
things.
We also have,
Being honest, but I also want to make sure kids feel, if we're going to do this, that they have the knowledge ahead of time before they get enrolled.
Well, and
If
I
we
guess
can
if
do
they're,
it, so.
well, and if they're gonna choose to take those classes, they have to do it. So,
Right.
yeah, okay.
since this is the discussion, what are our thoughts about retroactively doing?
I would not go there.
Just curious on that.
That was going to be a question I asked, which was, you want to retroactively apply this for high students, just going forward.
I don't know, that's hard because it's like anything that you do new, or, you know, you start discussing who's gonna get their student loans forgiven. You know, where does that lie? Where do these grades lie? That's a hard one to decide. I don't have a good answer for that. Wish I did.
I recall one parent that spoke a couple years ago who requested to look at this. And she said that her son was already graduating, but she was hoping to at least start that. So something is better than nothing, and then maybe we institute it now, that's better. Retroactive we can discuss later, but we can get started this semester, that's the best thing to do. That's what she wanted when she was up here talking.
Okay. If there's nothing further, COVID-19 information. Curriculum. Oh, I don't have that on my agenda.
Oh, yeah, that's Saturday.
Sorry. B, hi, curriculum updates.
You printed yours out as Friday this week. It's mostly on here for information and to answer any questions you might have. I wanted to give you an update on a few things that we have done. First one is the elementary math program. Jamie Thomas was given the task before I got this job to examine or lead the review of our math curriculum. And one area that we really needed to make some change in this summer was the elementary. I asked her to put on hold the high school, middle school for right now to give us more time. And so we're going to continue with the resources we've been using in the high school, middle school. In the elementary, we needed to be able to purchase materials, which we had not. And so she and a group of teachers that were here reviewed a number of options and selected the Bridges program. They also contacted all of the elementary teachers to give them an opportunity to come in and review the materials as well as the committee that worked. And so all the teachers were contacted, knowing what was chosen, had the opportunity to come in and review the materials, to ask questions and discuss those. And they decided to go ahead and move forward with that program. And so we are ordering those materials. One thing the teachers did ask for was training, and to make sure that was done. And so she is scheduling training that will take place before school starts, and we will be paying teachers a stipend to attend that, to encourage them to come, because it will be before they're scheduled back. If they're unable to come, we'll provide other resources or ways that they can obtain training as quickly as possible to provide them with what they need. So that program will be started this school year. And again, we're going to be able to use ESSER funds for that purchase. Another one is in academic intervention. Again, this is Jamie. She's been busy. And we are purchasing a program from Edmonton called Exact Path. This is something that Jamie looked into as a tool for her new academic intervention person to work with students. If you have more questions about that, Jamie can fill you in. But she did a lot of work on it, so I wanted to point that out to you. And the third thing that I have listed here is for a virtual school option. In the overview of the plan that we presented 2 weeks ago, I mentioned that we are planning on all students coming back in person, but we do recognize we may have some parents, for one reason or another, that would like a virtual option. And if those parents reach out to us, we would try to work with them in order to get them a virtual option that will meet their needs, but also, and that we would continue, well, it turns out the best way for us to do that, and also this is because, one of our parents talked about their ability of their child to participate in athletics as well. In order to do that, we have to run the program through our district. So as opposed to simply referring them to someone else, we can purchase seats in a program. The school will have to pay for the seats. We have to order a certain number. I'm looking at probably 20 seats. And at this time, we can add seats if it becomes necessary. And if we don't use the seats this fall, we don't lose them ever. They will remain on our account. We could use them a year from now, 2 years from now. We can use them for students that need credit recovery for one reason or another. So we are not going to lose the value from these. I have to credit Joellen O'Keefe and Homer, who is their Director of Instructional Services, who I have adopted as my unofficial Director of Instructional Services. She had already done a lot of investigation and legwork, looking at different companies, and in the short time frame that I had coming in, I listened to her carefully and took her recommendation, contacted them, went through my own demo with that company, and I like what I see from the program. They do provide a certified Michigan teacher with each course. As they need to, they will provide us with all the information we need for our pupil accounting. And it does include both asynchronous and synchronous learning for each student. High school, I believe, high school, middle school is 2 times a week of synchronous learning, and in the elementary, it's synchronous learning every day as an option. And so I'm setting up the what we need to do to have that ready right now. We have had so far, since our meeting in July, we've only had 2 parents contact us asking about a virtual option. I anticipate we will have a few more likely contact us, and so we'll be ready. Again, we're not going to send out an email saying choose one or the other, because we really are hoping kids will come back in person, but we will have that available if needed.
Looks like it's either K through 5 or 6 through 12, so you have to get 2 different types of seats then.
Yes, we have to buy 2 different types of seats, but what I asked was, well, suppose we have 12 students that want 6 through 12, 8. And basically, once you pay the money basically goes into, we're gonna pay them the money up front. At that point, if we needed to add an extra seat in 612, it would just subtract that money from the K-5 side. So in reality, we're determining how much we pay them by how many of each seat we buy. But when we actually use them, it's just, you've got this much credit, now you're gonna use a 612 seat, we're gonna subtract $2,500 from your credit. When the students sign up for the class, we're gonna ask them to make a commitment for the full year, because it is an expense that you cannot get the money back. You can purchase it for shorter periods for up to a semester, or as small as a semester length, but it is more expensive that way than if you purchase the entire year. It's possible a student can say, I want to sign up for a semester. We would have to really think about that, look at the difference. I think it's $1,600 for a semester versus $2,500 for a whole year.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
One thing I'm really concerned about is that parents that sign up for virtual learning, and then the conditions in the school change to where that COVID-19 is not a problem anymore, and that whether the vaccinations or whatever it is, and that parent is naturally going to say that even though I've signed up for a commitment for a year, I want my kid to come back for face-to-face learning. Comment?
Well, we would ask them to commit to that entire year, and we would expect them to keep that commitment at that point.
That's a question you're going to have.
I understand that. Unless the board is willing to forego the funds lost. Because you have 14 days. If a student withdraws within 14 days from beginning the class, that seat will remain available for another student to take. Once you pass 14 days, that student's committed. So we could have a student who signs up for it, tries it, they're in it for a week and a half, and they come in and say, this isn't working for me, I really want to come back to school. At that point, they could withdraw, and we would still have that seat available. But once they pass 14 days, that money has already been spent. And then if the board is okay with us absorbing that loss when they come back, then that's a decision that we would make. I'm not particularly, I really would expect them to make a firm commitment to that.
I'm going to be on the reverse side of that question, and that is, what if things go to the fact that we have to close school? Then what happens with the students that are not in that virtual world that has already been going? What happens then between the type of education that students are getting?
Okay, well, if we have to close school, that's one of the things that not every detail was put in what we released to the public, right? Tried to release to the public at that time for two reasons. Number one, I wanted to get something out so that people knew where we stood at that particular date and time. I have spoken with districts. I saw an email from one again today that they have an idea which direction they're going to go, but they just don't want to announce it. And so people in their districts are guessing what they're going to do under a whole variety of things. In the interest of openness, I wanted to get out what our plan was as of that date. And so that includes both with the mask situation, which it was as of that date, as well as the virtual learning options. And so things are going to change, and I have a more detailed document that I've been working on. As you can imagine, I've got a lot of things going on that includes all of the different things that we're doing. So the more detailed document would include all that. As far as our own students, our staff are going to continue to use Schoology, which is the LMS that we use. They're going to continue to post their assignments in Schoology. The advantage of all of our students having their devices, and now, since we are in this mode, we are assigning devices to elementary students, not just before we went into COVID, when we handed out devices in the elementary, we didn't assign them in our system to a particular student. The teacher just would hand it to a student. So the student would know that was theirs. When we needed to take them home, that meant we had a lot of work to do to get them ready. So we've changed that, and now all of our devices, K-12, are assigned to students. All of them will be in cases ready to go home. So if we have to go home to virtual learning, if it comes out and when we need to close, go to virtual learning, we should be able to shift to that mode relatively easily and quickly with our current teachers.
So then I just want to make sure I understand it right. The students that choose to do virtual at the get-go will stay with their virtual teachers, and the
Yes.
teacher or the students who have been coming to school will then go virtual with our teachers.
That's
Okay, I
correct.
just wanted to make sure that I understood.
That's correct, yes.
What was,
Right.
okay. So I have a question that kind of is Dave's situation. What if a parent said, I would like a virtual option until a vaccine is made available for my kiddos? Would we consider a semester as opposed to a year? Should we choose this? I mean, would we lose more money if we said we're going to purchase a year and then that kid only went through the semester? Would it be better to have some?
Just to interrupt real quick, the difference in cost for K through 5 for a semester versus a year is less than the difference in cost for 6 through 12.
Yes, K-5, it's either 3,000 or 3,200.
It's a $200
So it's
difference
a small difference.
for K through 5.
Yes.
There's
Greater in 6-12.
If we
It's
had
$700.
so if we bought a full year, is it assigned to just one student?
Yes.
Okay.
When you pay for it, we would pay, say we bought 20 seats of K or 6-12, that's 2,500 a piece, that'd be $10,000. More than that. $25,000. $50,000. I don't know what exactly. Whatever
It's a
the
big
dollar
number.
My
It's
next,
a big dollar.
my next question.
Whatever the dollar amount is, what would happen is then, as we assign seats, so we have a student comes in, they want K-12, and they want virtual learning, they say, I'm gonna attend virtual learning all year long. I know I'm gonna do that, no doubts. We could assign them a $2,500 seat. Another student comes in and says, well, I'd like to go the first semester virtual, but I'm not sure about the whole year. We could choose to assign them a seat that would cost $1,600. But we need to be prepared that if halfway through the year, at that point, they wanted to continue virtual, it would cost us another $1,600.
So it'd be an extra $200 for an elementary school. What's the difference for a high school? Okay. So for me, I feel like the flexibility that we can give to parents is worth the $200 or the $700. That's just my, it's not a board directive, just a gen discussion.
And this is just discussion anyway, and some things I don't understand, so. For one thing is that with the situation being so fluid, I think that one discussion we're gonna have is if a student decides to come back, are we gonna forego the money and have them come back to school for face-to-face learning and the companionship of students and teachers? I think it's a very important discussion to have. The other one is, I'm not really familiar with COVID money. I understand that this school district and other school districts are receiving money simply because of the COVID situation.
Yes.
Could this money that students decide to do virtual and come back, can that money come out of COVID funds?
Yes, it could. I'm just saying we still don't want to be wasteful with the money, even if it is coming out of COVID funds. So we could certainly decide to, if a student came after 2 months and said, you know, things have gotten better around here in Ranch County, I'm comfortable coming back now in person. You just have to realize that that same student might 6 weeks later say, you know what, I need to go back to virtual. And at that point, you would have to repurchase.
That's something we'd have to discuss for sure, whether they can go back or not. what I understand now is that somewhere in September or October, vaccinations will likely be available for those people that are 12 and under. And several people have spoken here tonight that would be looking at that when vaccinations are available for their kids to want face-to-face learning in the school. And if we're saying that, hey, you can't do that, you've got to finish out the semester of the year, that's going to open up not just problems for us. You're the superintendent, you're going to get the calls.
You do have to realize, though, that the vaccination rate, which I believe Nicole said was 36%, and I think she can confirm this, the numbers I saw were that amongst students 12 to 18, it's actually closer to 15 to 20%. So even those students that have been able to get vaccinated for several months now are choosing not to. And so my guess is that even once they're all able to be vaccinated, you are still going to have many people like those here who will want them to continue to wear masks if only 15, 20% of them are vaccinated. And my guess is that even in this community, even fewer of our K-5 parents will be willing, or K-6 parents will be willing to vaccinate their kids once it's available. So I really doubt, I mean, that's my own personal feeling, is unless attitudes drastically change in this community, I doubt you're going to see more than 20-25% of our children vaccinated even in the next year, even if a vaccine becomes available.
That 20 to 25% or 15% will feel more protected because 99.99% of people that are vaccinated do not end up in the hospital, and it's lesser on younger kids than will be on older kids. So I'm just talking about the people that are, I hate to say this, are responsible to get their kids vaccinated and responsible to say I want virtual
I
learning.
understand that. 99 point whatever percent of children don't end up in the hospital right now, even if they get it. So.
Back to the financial piece. I personally think that $200 is pretty minor. I mean, we're not going to have 100 kids do it, so that $700 starts to be a bigger problem, in my opinion. And I think it's easier for a middle schooler or a high schooler to stay virtual or to. They understand that decision a little better. They understand what it looks like more than a second grader, for example, or a parent of a second grader. So I personally would have a problem with buying semester tickets, I guess, for the K-5. The 6 through 12, I'm on the fence, I guess, because it is a very large expense.
And most of those students, 12 and up, certainly do have an option to be vaccinated now as well. So if they've chosen now, they're not going to do that. I can see asking them to commit to it for a year.
I guess I'm saying the financial impact I think is relatively small for K-5 if we go with the semester option. I mean, if they say, sure, I don't want to go the whole year, then we can buy a whole year. I don't know. You probably can't get that information before you have to write the check, though. But some people would know and some people wouldn't. But I think, especially for the younger kids, a semester is probably, you can absorb $200 a few times for people that option. What I am excited.
Just don't turn it off.
But I am excited about this option. I think it's a great opportunity for people. And I do think that there are positives and negatives to virtual, our teachers and not our teachers, but I think this is probably the best way for us to go.
Yeah, with our teachers all being back in person 5 days a week, there really was no way to use our teachers to offer reliably a virtual option for our teachers, because we would have to do it depending on whether they volunteered to do it on their own time with or something like that. We just couldn't reliably do that.
Okay, so now I think we're gonna move into the COVID-19 information. COVID-19 information?
I'm sorry, Mrs. Thomas was interrupting me. You should be sitting in the back row if you're gonna.
I heard some grumblings about I heard it. I was I was moving us on.
Okay, since each of you have a memo that I gave the board members regarding the current COVID-19 situation. Since the meeting in July, in which I posted our plan, that day actually is when the American Academy of Pediatricians announced that they were recommending universal masking in schools, and the CDC followed suit last week in announcing universal masking. I have been reading and gathering a lot of information, which I shared with all of you, on COVID-19, looking at the rates, looking at the illness, the risk factors for students below 18. So you have some of the numbers that are available for in terms of the high-risk cases, deaths, and hospitalization rates. We also know that Branch County is in a high-risk area right now. Calhoun County was at a moderate risk level, although in a meeting just this morning with Eric Hessel, he told us that he believes that that will be going up to the next level, not all the way to high, but the next level up soon. And so there are some changes on the horizon there. I will agree with the statement that we do not want to look at or consider what other districts do in terms of making our decision and saying, well, if they're going to do this, then we have to. But I also believe that other districts are looking at and weighing the same information we are. And so the conclusions they reach, if there are nearly unanimous in some ways or another, can help confirm or refute a decision we might make. In other words, if we make a decision to go back without masks and the districts around us all do not, I would question our judgment, and I would say, what do they know that we don't know? And I would talk to them and ask them, what is it you're looking at that is leading to that decision? Likewise, it would be the opposite. I would want to know, why are you going back without masks when we're choosing to have masks? So I think it is relevant and important to ask them what they're doing and to share information so that we can communicate and know whether our decisions are in that line. The Branch ISD, I received a communication from Chris Jenkins today. She is not prepared yet to announce what their plan is. She's going to wait until closer to the first day of school to decide. And that's certainly their priority to do. I think Coldwater has not yet made anything public. I believe that Quincy and Brunson at this point are saying they're returning without masks, but if they're meeting tonight, or they could change as well. So I don't look at any decision we make as being locked in stone. As I said 2 weeks ago, that's as of that particular moment. Athens, it appears to me Athens and Homer are leaning toward coming back without a mask requirement, at least as of our conversations earlier today. I'm not speaking for them, so I'm not going to let them announce what they're doing, but that was the direction I thought they seemed to be leaning. It's an extremely difficult situation, and we have a group of people, as I encouraged the ones that spoke with me. I spoke with Nicole, and I spoke with, I do this with names. Jessica, all of you will get used to me saying them, Ron. When I need a name that locks in my brain, I can't get it out. Jessica, at length earlier. They were and then I spoke with one other parent and an email from our staff member who spoke earlier. Those are the contacts I've had in regard to questions about being, whether we're, after we announced that we could come back without masks. So those are the only contacts I've had in that regard. My recommendation that I gave each of you was at this time to continue with the plan as it currently stands, in large part because we still have a couple more weeks before school begins. We don't know what is going to change again between now and then. It's possible the direction could head back in a positive way before then. I don't know that for a fact. But if it does, I would rather change. If we are going to change, I would rather change once and not twice. I would be opposed to saying today, now we're going to require masks, and then 2 weeks from now, with a crowd of different faces in the audience, in different numbers, because things change, going back the other way. I don't want to be seen in that light. But I will say that it definitely is looking like a more difficult, even more difficult decision now than it was 2 weeks ago, in what to do. There are going to be, if we choose to require masking, universal masking, we have had contact with a number of parents. We had 3 students come in. Kelly told me about them. The parents said, I'm enrolling them. However, if you're going to require masks, I'm going to homeschool. I know that we will have many students who will be in that situation. Many of our students who were virtual, I would say at least half the students who were virtual at the end of the school year were virtual because, if not more, were virtual because of the mask required. Not because of COVID, but because they did not want their kids to wear masks in school. And so we will face a large number of students that will either be looking for another district around us or will be choosing to go virtual. And so it is an extremely difficult situation that we're in right now. And that's why I think it's important that the board discuss this, and all of you, if you have input, you represent the community. I would appreciate your input, and I know the community would like to hear your input.
I'm ready for my input.
I'm shocked.
Yeah, I know. And I have not made a decision yet, but I'll first read this, and it might be a little lengthy, but I want to get it all out. It's time to call a spade a spade. As a school board member, I have to make a decision on Monday what the school year will look like. It's a no-win situation, mask or no mask. The only thing for certain is that we're in the position because of those who refuse to get vaccinated. Oh, you know the stats. 99% of those who are in hospitals have not been vaccinated. In Branch County, cases are twice as high as any other county in Michigan per 100,000. I have a little different figures than you gave us. I got mine from the Coldwater reporter, Don Reed. So they'll make the same point. The county's positive testing rate is 18.7%, which is the highest in Michigan. Needing a 70% vaccination rate, we stand at a pathetic 45%. Because of this, Branch County Health Department recommends mask wearing for all grades in schools. The result is that I get calls and get stopped and asked to do something about opening schools normally. Me? How about you? Get vaccinated. Convince your friends to get vaccinated. Work together to put COVID-19 in the rearview mirror before school starts. This is not a decision that is a normal one. We are talking about protecting the district's most valuable treasures, our kids. This is not about your constitutional rights. We have a representative democracy, and government is given the right to set laws to protect others. Like it or not, you do not have an individual right to not wear a seatbelt, to drive drunk, or to ignore the speed limit. Vaccinations are required to enter schools since 1850. to prevent smallpox. Vaccines generally, even though that every state doesn't agree, these are the ones they agree on. Vaccines are required for daycare, pre-K, and school admittance. You have to have diphtheria and tetanus shots, hepatitis B vaccine, measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine, the polio vaccine, and also chickenpox vaccines. Now, here's where it comes down to my decision, and I haven't made up my mind totally. I like when Chris said that basically that this is a fluid situation and that we can not do anything tonight and come back in 2 weeks and make a decision. The health department and CDC are not requiring schools to wear a mask. It's a recommendation. I have a problem with saying we have to require masks when their own health department, the state, and the CDC is only making this a recommendation. That's a problem for me. I'm a government teacher. What they're doing is they're trying to football it down to lower levels. That's exactly what it is. But that puts us in a position here at the board of having to make a decision that they should make. If they want to require masks, they should take the word recommendation out and require. Number 2. I disagree sort of about other schools around us, even though Chris did touch on this. It seems like every school is making a decision because they're not required, they're only recommended at this particular point not to wear masks. I love this district, and I know and you know that if other districts around us are not requiring masks, we're going to have a mass exodus from the school system going to schools around us that are not requiring masks. Now, people that want the mask aren't going to have a problem with that. But you live in a district right now where you have probably a 60-40 split. 60% don't want masks. And most of those people aren't vaccinated. And shame on you. Shame on you. You're putting all of us at risk and having us make a tough decision that we have to make. 3. And I'm speaking for Chris Katz. If we go against recommendation of what all the other schools are doing, and the fact that this isn't anything but a recommendation, it's not required, we are putting him in a very difficult situation. He's going to have to answer a lot of questions, and I'll tell you, people are mad. If you read my post I just read you, there's 4 or 5 people that went on and on and on with conspiracy theories, and I want to tell you, if you're listening, stupid stuff. It makes no sense whatsoever. I had people online tell me that they had doctors tell them that they shouldn't take the vaccine. If you read it, I asked for the names of the doctors. Not one person gave me the name of a doctor. And I talked to the Coldwater Reporter, and he does not know anybody in this area that's a doctor that's saying don't get the vaccines. And if you're listening tonight, send me the doctor. I want to talk to him. By the way, basically, I agree that 12 and under are precious and that we have a problem there because they can't get the vaccines. Really, the entire school have a problem with it because parents are making decisions for kids not to get the vaccine shot that are sophomores and juniors. And they're putting people at risk. And one more problem I have is school employees who refuse to get the vaccination. I'm being blunt, but I believe it 100%. You're causing us trouble. You should get off your rear ends and get a vaccine shot. You're making it tougher for me. I don't know the percentage, but the percentage is high in our district of teachers choosing not to get the vaccination shot. I think you should reconsider if you work here and you love these kids. Because if you spread that vaccine to one of our kids, and it comes from you, can you live with that? Finally, this is a fluid situation. I'm concerned about the outbreak, changing guidelines from federal, state, and counties, finding substitutes, hospitalizations, and deaths. I tell you though, I'm open to any circumstances, and at this particular point, with the caveat that we're not gonna leave it here. I'm telling you folks, this changes daily. I mean, I agree with Chris. If we make a decision today to go back on what we just did, and then, just like you said before, and I said this at the meeting before, as soon as the meeting ends, we get a recommendation from doctors saying to get everybody with masks on. It's a no-win situation. Maybe I'm not speaking for everybody on this board, but I'll tell you, I am not afraid to speak up and say what I believe. And this community, which cares so much about it, we had so many people come out to a concert praising God and saying how great God is. And some of those people aren't vaccinated. All I can say is that sometimes our own churches hurt us. They do. And I'm a pastor. And I've gone through it now for a long, long time. So, in conclusion, I would go along at this particular point, not making it an action item, and letting it sort of drift to see what's going to happen in the next 2 weeks, with the openness that before school opens, that we make this an action item and decide before school opens exactly what we're going to do. Because I'm confused. I don't know which way to go. Thank you.
Next.
Looks like you.
Can you hear me now? Obviously, this is a very divisive issue, and it's divisive because it involves health. Myself and my wife have spent many, many hours reading, listening, reading journals. My wife is a microbiologist and molecular geneticist by trade. She spent time working at Michigan State in the virology lab with swine. She administered and watched vaccines on swine for years. And she knows a lot about vaccines, and I trust her information. We looked at medical journals together. We watched different news organizations. We've done a lot of research, and I would challenge anyone to do that as well, because that's important. Part of the problem is finding data that's correct and data that's not, because just as one person can spew numbers one direction, one person can spew numbers the other. We talked about a vaccine that, according to the information that I've seen, there's been over 33,000 deaths due to this vaccine, which exceeds all vaccines given, I think, the entire world in the last 26 years. This one vaccine has caused more deaths. So there is a reason people aren't getting it, and it is different. It's a fact. It's different than any other vaccine ever released in this country in terms of how it works, how it codes for the spike protein versus the attenuated version of the virus. I mean, there's a lot to it. It's not just, and the vaccine was pushed out faster than any other vaccine ever. There was a vaccine that in the 70s for swine flu that my understanding is killed 30 people, and they pulled it from the shelves and said that's not safe anymore. So there's a reason people aren't getting the vaccine, and you can argue why not, but there's a reason for it. So be aware of that. But regardless, my wife and I have spent a lot of time looking at information. We made a decision how we're going to handle the vaccine, how we're going to handle COVID if we get it, which we've already had it, and other things like that. So we have tried to educate ourselves as best we can with the information that's available.
I only have two things.
Wait a minute,
Wait,
he's speaking. He's speaking. We're not gonna interrupt him.
Oh, I didn't. I thought you were done. Go ahead.
No, so I'm not going to give my opinion here. I'd be happy to share with anyone that wants to after the fact. The discussion here is about what we want to do in the school. And the bottom line for me is I don't think it's the school's responsibility, the local school's responsibility to mandate mask or no mask, to mandate vaccine or no vaccine to local school level. So I would be opposed to a mandate. If you want to get a vaccine, great. But wear a mask, great. I do have questions and concerns about K-5 kids wearing masks appropriately. So even if you do instantly get a mask mandate, I see a lot of this action and that action, and I don't know that it would be effective even in K-5 if you wore a mask. So I don't think that's a beneficial requirement to add to K-5 kids. So I'm done on that perspective. So I would agree with the current decision to not require that. You're free to do it, but not require it.
The only thing I want to say is that a couple of things. There's only been 2 cases. It's J&J vaccine that have been proven to cause problems, and that's been corrected. The 33,000 figure, if I've heard it, is 6,000, but there's millions and millions of vaccination shots, are basically by the CDC being contributed possibly to other reasons besides the shot. So that There's only 2 confirmed cases of people that so far have had reactions from. The other thing about the length of time, this has been tested for a long period of time and is basically safe. And it also keeps you out of the hospital. However, whether or not we disagree on the facts and whether we're getting vaccines, you and I are on the same page tonight on the final thing that I said and you said. We seem to be in total agreement not to really change anything at this particular time to go along with the superintendent's recommendation. So our argument might be more of a personal one than an argument about what we're going to do as a school tonight.
So I guess I'll go next. And it is a very difficult situation to be in. We all have heard both sides of every argument. We have read all types of news information. We listen to different news sources, and it depends on the source as to what is said. One thing that I don't think that that we can disagree on is the fact that it's our responsibility to keep our kids safe, right? That's our responsibility as a school board, is to keep our kids safe. And, you know, I'm sure that I could ask this group right here, right now, how many of you know someone that had COVID? And how many of you know someone that died from COVID? And a lot of you are going to raise hands. And I, for one, had it. I know Darren had said that he dealt with it in his family, but I'm going to tell you right now, I'm still dealing with long-term effects. There are still things that I'm not going to ever be able to do, ever again, ever. Am I willing to let a kid be put in that position where they can never, ever be able to do something again because we can ask them to wear a mask? That's where I have my issue, is because I don't want to have a kid not be able to breathe like me. It's not cool. And as far as asking kids to wear a mask in school, let me tell you what, I have a 4-year-old niece who's been wearing a mask for the last 1.5 years. She's 4.5 years old. She's been wearing one since she was 3. And she is so used to hers that she tried to eat through it one day. Like she tried to spoon yogurt through it because she forgot she had it on. What makes a difference is how we as adults are models when the decision is made. What makes a difference for kids is how we as adults deal with it. Not by saying, oh, my kid isn't going to do that, my kid isn't going to do that. No, they're not going to do it because you're telling them they're not going to do it. That's where I have my problem from. And I know you have your rant. Well, that's my rant. My rant is that these kids are being modeled to be obstinate about wearing a mask. And that's my issue. As far as what we need to do in school, I think we need to figure out a way to make compromises. If there are a group of kids who feel like they would like to wear masks, then I'd like to see them put in the same class. It might be kind of difficult, but I think it can be figured out. Especially in the elementary level. There's no reason why elementary kids can't be in the same room if you have a group of kids that want to, or their parents want to have them wear a mask.
And that is something that we have been looking at. Jennifer and I had a discussion about it today, trying to figure out the logistics of doing something like that. It's something that and other options are things that we've been talking about. It's difficult to figure out how we're going to be able to do that. I'm not saying it's not impossible, but it would be very difficult.
But it is possible. I understand it's difficult, but there are ways to make things work. And I really think that there are ways that we can make things work as best as we can for everyone that's involved. I have to look at it. I know I don't have a dog in this fight. I don't have a child that's here at school. My children are grown and out of the community because that's where they need to be for their jobs. But I have this thought, what if it's my grandson that's coming here? What would I want? that's where I have to say, I think we need to do everything we can to try to keep our kids safe.
Could I ask you a question that would really
Sure.
help me? If we had, say we had only 30 parents or 30 children that their parents really insisted they wear a mask, would you then be comfortable with the remaining students not wearing masks if their parents don't want them to?
Well, I guess I would have to think about that, but my first inclination is to say, okay, let's say you've got 10 kids in 3rd grade. We're just going to use that as an example. You have 10 kids in 3rd grade whose parents would like them to wear masks. Put all 10 of those kids in the same classroom. At least that cuts them down by 30% from the other, there's 20 kids. I don't know what your class numbers are, but we'll say it's 30 just for easy math. Okay, so you have 20 kids that aren't masked and you have 10 kids that are masked. That's better than 29 kids that aren't masked and 1 that is, right?
Right.
That's where I'm at today.
Paula, I want to give you a shout if you want to talk.
Bring it close to
Yeah,
you.
bring it closer.
So where I come from is in the medical field my whole life, since I was 18. So my friends, my family, they work in the medical field. Everybody's in science, everybody believes in science. We study, we've seen a lot of nursing friends, I have a lot of doctor, PA friends. I got the shot, and I got it after I did a lot of research. And actually my nephew works at Pfizer. I talked to a scientist that developed this at Pfizer decades ago. They're part of it, they brought it back out. I was very high risk, that's why I did it. I decided, I really weighed my risk, and I'm gonna talk, I'm very philosophical. But there's high risk in everything. There's high risk in every choice we make our entire life. And we're not gonna protect ourselves. Half the things we have fears about aren't gonna happen to us anyway. I also don't understand the mask at all, because working in the medical field, I had to use it. I had to wear it a lot. When I worked in the doctor's office for a while, we did a lot of procedures. The dentist office, they're always wearing masks. It just, to me, I just don't get it at all, why that's such a big deal. I really don't. I don't think it has anything to do with political views at all. It's health, it's safety, it's protecting people. I know several people that have got this disease and got really, really sick, and long-term illnesses from it, relapse and malaise, and just, yeah. And I didn't want to end up like that. I felt the risk of getting it, and I did have, I will admit it, my throat shut down 3 times. That's a really high risk. I'm probably lucky I'm here right now. Talked about using a different route next time, the next shot, because I'll go do it again, because I certainly don't want to have to deal with that. I feel the same way that we need to protect these kids and the families, because kids get it, they take it home. Grandma might live with them, and the people that I've lost were not even, one of them didn't have any illness at all and still died. So I am passionate about protecting us with this. So I thought the same thing like you did, Amber. Like, I wrote down things like, maybe we need to think outside the box and teach in pods. With people, if you're gonna, because I also represent the school district, and here we are at this 40%, and we're in a really hot spot. So we're very unique. We're in an area of a hot spot of this disease because people won't get vaccinated, and they don't even want to wear masks either. So we have to really look at this as that, oh boy, if we go without masks, people are going to get sick and more are going to die in this community. There's like 10 people that have died in this community from that. And I'm taking a long time, I apologize.
Don't apologize.
Part of it, people say, well, they had a comorbidity. You know what? They walked around with that comorbidity for decades. They didn't die of it. They died. They would have still been walking around. They died of COVID. It was comorbidity. So my feeling is that we have to be really creative. I don't know why we don't have more. I went right away because I wanted to keep my studio open and spent $1,000 on air cleaners. We've got great windows here. I think we have to really think about the ventilation, about fans, about fresh air breaks, about teaching in pods. I think we have to recommend the mask. I am worried that there's kids that we're going to lose a lot of kids. And again, just going to ask everybody that wants to pull their kids over this, how much do you love this school and all of us, and in your charger, you're over a mask? That's what I get right down to. I can't really quite understand. This is not going to last forever. It takes a whole, I want to be an example. I want our schools to be an example that did it so well, that being in a hot spot, that we survived, and that we didn't lose any more people, and that we were smart enough in this time frame to survive it. My great-grandpa didn't. He died of the Spanish flu. And my grandpa cried his entire life, even in his 80s, about losing his daddy as a 9-year-old. And that's what I think of this pandemic in the same way. This is a pandemic. This is a unique thing we're dealing with, and we're not handling it right. We're not. My relatives that work at Sparrow, everybody that's in that ICU has not had the vaccine. The ones that are suffering and that are going to die have not had the vaccine. People have been very open with numbers. So I really want to think about how where I end up is just that we do have to watch these numbers really close. And everybody needs to really think about this and really how much do you love your Charger Nation? And we are in a hot spot, and how much are we going to work together to just get through this, to just get through another year in the safest way for the kids, and the kids going home to mom and dad and grandpa and grandma and aunts and uncles. And to really look at your values and where you're getting your information and separate it. Start to look at it, like step out of it and start to look at it realistically. Done.
So I feel a responsibility not only to the students in this district, but the community at large. And this is not a judgment on the audience, but clearly the community is concerned about the decision that the school is making as well, because there are several people sitting in the audience tonight who do not have children currently in the district. And they're concerned that we're going to have 350 bodies without masks in one building for 7 hours a day that are then going to walk out into the community. And the data that we were provided as board members from Calhoun County said schools didn't spread COVID last year. We didn't spread it because we were masking, and we were social distancing, and we were cleaning. And we were putting all of these layered strategies together. And I think it is irresponsible of us to just say, hey, we're done. I'm tired. I don't like this. I understand. They're hot. They're uncomfortable. I get it. They are, all of those things. We don't have air conditioning in our building, so when it's 90 degrees, it sucks. But it is not okay for us to just willy-nilly start spreading this stuff around and then go, oh my gosh, we lost this person, and we lost this person, and now this person can't breathe very well because they have this long-term disease. I wish that we would put some numbers in place to say, okay, when our community hits this threshold for vaccination level, we can then pull off this mitigation strategy. When we hit, this level for, we're at, what was the number I showed you tonight? 254 cases per 100,000. That's like almost 10 times the number that they want us to be at, which is 30 cases per 100,000 in Orange County. We are transmitting it 10 times greater than what is recommended, and we're going to now pull masks. And I get it. If Quincy and Brunson and Homer and Athens don't have mask requirements, there are going to be kids who leave. And that is a huge financial impact on this district. I'm not saying that I'm not listening to that. I just feel like it is irresponsible for us to say, we've done all these strategies and they worked and now we just don't want to anymore. I'm frustrated by that.
If I could just interrupt you for
Let me finish one more thing. We didn't have subs and we didn't have bus drivers. And we prioritized 5 days a week of student instruction. That's a compromise already. There were districts last year that went 2 days a week with half their kids and 2 days a week with half their kids and virtual is on Wednesdays. And so now we're coming back 5 days a week, which we all know is best for kids to be back in here. But then if we don't have teachers, how are we going to do this? We're going to have one classroom go virtual or we're going to shut down the whole school. So then we throw that up into the wind. And finally, what are we going to do about sick days? So if you're not vaccinated and you're not masked and you have to keep calling in sick because you're in quarantine and then you run out of sick days, are people now not going to get paid? We have to consider that. I feel like maybe we need to prioritize, maybe we need to put a big whiteboard up that says what are our priorities? Is 5 days a week instruction a priority? Can we pull that off? Is keeping them safe a priority? Because I think we've got 15 different things coming at us all at one time, and we're not layering it to say, okay, from this whole mess, what's the number one? I think most people in this room would say getting kids in the building face-to-face is our number one. And if parents choose to keep them away from here because they don't like the masks, that we can't control every decision that a family makes. They're going to make decisions that are best for their family for whatever reason. But if we think that 5 days a week is instruction is important, how do we keep kids safe doing that? I know logistically, padding, 5 third graders and 2 second graders and 5 kindergartners and oh yeah, let's throw another 4th grader in one classroom with one teacher. That is a nightmare and a half. But we have to start thinking about something because we're making people mad no matter what decision we make. I'm shocked by that, folks, because this board has had so many easy decisions for the last 4 years. Every decision we've made makes people mad. So at some point, you have to look yourself in the mirror and say, I know I'm going to make you mad and I'm really sorry about that, but this is how I feel. This is the right decision I feel, and we're not going to vote the same. We're going to be split on this decision. So I think you are in a terrible position because you're going to hear it no matter what. I'm not, because I'm going to say, here's Chris's number.
Let me just give him my work number, not my home number. Here, I just wanted to say a couple of things. First of all, you kind of pointed at me and tapped me when you said you understand being concerned about the money. Frankly, I'm not concerned about the money. If we have kids who, if we require masks and kids don't come here and instead go to Quincy or Brunson or Athens because they're not masking, I would prefer that. I would feel good about them at least being in-person learning. I would feel better about them at least being in a classroom. My concern is not about the kids that will leave us and go to these other districts. That's not my concern. My concern is that we identified the overwhelming majority of our kids that were virtual last year were not successful, did not learn. And we have huge numbers of kids that did not learn. And even those kids, we will refuse them the opportunity to go virtual again because we're not going to perpetuate that. My concern is, though, there are any number of places that will be happy to take their money and let them be a virtual student, that will let them sign up and go virtual. And so my concern is we require masks and we have 70, 80 kids who don't come to school here in person because of that, whose parents say, you're gonna go virtual, and then they spend a year getting nothing again. That's my worry, and that's what keeps me up at night when I think about, if I could snap my fingers, require masks, and have every kid here, I'd do it in a minute, I would. But we will lose kids that way, and so I don't know how you weigh the risks and whose kids you pick. If you really are concerned about kids unmasked in school, then putting them in pods isn't an answer either, because just putting the kids that want to wear masks or the parents want them to wear masks in a room, well, that helps them. Doesn't help the other kids that we're concerned about.
Correct.
So if you're really concerned about what happens to those kids that don't wear masks, that's not an answer. That won't help. If what you're concerned about is getting all the kids in the school, yeah, that will probably do it if we can provide a room. And so, that's why I've tried to look at a way to do that. But it would mean that you would have the majority of your kids. And I think it's even more than 60-40, Dave. I think it's probably more like 70-30 at best.
70-30.
70 that would want to be not masked, yes.
And I don't know if it was Amber or Dave said something about parents modeling.
I emailed our teachers, our elementary teachers. I didn't get back, I don't, and I might have gotten one, but they all wanted to be back unmasked. There were very few of them. I asked if there were any that would be willing voluntarily to be masked in the classroom with masked students. And I had 3 or 4 who said they would do that. But all of them that I heard back from, I believe, and I don't want to miss anybody, so I'll say all but one, so you're the one if you're. But the overwhelming majority, they want to be unmasked. So that's the view of the community.
I want to be unmasked too.
Well,
It's not that I want to be
I
masked.
understand. I mean, in the current environment,
I get it.
they do not want to be required to wear a mask.
Yep, I get it.
The only thing I can add is that I still stick by the idea that we still have a little time before school starts to make a final decision to get input. And I've prayed about this and thought about this for a long time. And I really agree with what they said today. I agree with 100%. But this is a fluid situation. And the last things I heard were, and I only stick to things that are real facts, is that the vaccination rate is now going up. It's increasing in large numbers in areas. And if the vaccination rate goes up and the numbers go down, then we're safer making a decision that is more comparable with 70% that you say come back unmasked. My fear is that it might go the other way, and that we're going to start with another pandemic when it gets colder on the outside. And I'll say this again, I know that sometimes I say I rant, and you probably do that, but when I believe something and know I'm right, I don't mind saying it. I really believe that we have to have wisdom to make a decision. We just can't throw something out. We've had a tremendous discussion tonight. It's being filmed. I think it's a tremendous discussion for people to digest that are listening to what we said, with the idea that before school starts, we're going to relook at this. When we look at it, we have to look at it through stats. We have to see how many people are vaccinated, how safe is it. And I hope everybody's listening to me. You got a high school kid, vaccinated, because they can be vaccinated. You can stop all of this. And with grade school kids, I do know, and it is a fact, that grade school kids getting hospitalized and dying is not really a real big situation. Since it started, there have been 994 deaths of kids. You're talking about all the ones that have died, 60 million or whatever it is. 994 is small. And today, there are very few kids that are in the hospital suffering from COVID. So 12 and under is probably the safest age. But they're going to get a chance of being vaccinated in September or October. It's coming real soon. So, but my advice And somebody said they probably changed their mind now that they picked me because they thought I had wisdom. My advice is, with that, all the wisdom I can give you is to let things rest tonight, let it sink in, and before school comes out, put it on the agenda where we actually have a chance to vote on how we're going to open schools, not just putting it on Chris to make a recommendation. That we, as each and every board member, votes their conscience before school opens with the facts we have then. Chris made a really important point about the fact that things change rather quickly. I don't want to come back and make another decision. We make one decision, make another one tonight, and come back and make a third one later. That just confuses people. So my only suggestion with all the wisdom I have is, let's let it be a public debate now. Let's see what the people in this district really want to do with their kids.
I have it on here as an action item for the August 16th board meeting then.
That won't be it.
Dave.
I gotta go on vacation. I'm retiring. I'm
You can call into the meeting, Dave. You can call into the meeting.
I'm on vacation.
You can't vote if you call in, because I couldn't call in.
Yeah. Right.
I'm not saying I want to call in, I'm just saying that I can't be here.
I just want to, we could debate this for hours, and we could talk about natural immunity and all those things that would be really exciting, but I just want to say a couple things. I bit my tongue a lot, that this is not what Darren thinks our, this is a school board meeting, so I'm trying to stay away from that. I just want to make one point though. We talked about the safety of our kids, and that is the most important thing. I have 2 kids in this district, and I would stand, the top 3 people on this planet are my wife and my kids, and I would do anything for 3 of them. I mean that. I would give up my life for theirs without hesitation. That being said, I am perfectly comfortable with my kids going to school without a mask on. You can call me an idiot, you can say I'm crazy. The masks that we wear are not meant to keep viruses away. We could argue the efficacy of masks all day. My point is, if you ask me if I care about the safety of our kids, the answer is yes. Just because you and I may have a different opinion on the efficacy of masks or the vaccine does not mean that if I'm willing to send my own kids, who I care more about than, unfortunately, your kids, I care about all kids, everyone matters. My point is, the people that I care about most on this planet, that I would give my life for, I'm willing to let them go without a mask, because I don't think masks are an effective way to prevent the virus, that's all. So it's not an argument of safety, it's an argument of whether it works or not.
If we do require masks, would your kids still go to this school?
No, my daughter would not. And that was not my decision, that was her decision. I mean, I can enforce it, I can tell you're going to go to school anyway, but you asked both our kids, my daughter said, if I wear a mask, I cannot breathe. I cannot breathe, I can't. And she has problems with asthma, she has problems in sports, so we get a virtual option, so it was an easy answer. If you don't want to go to, if you don't want to wear a mask, and they have the option, that's fine. Now, if the school says you have to wear a mask, I haven't had the discussion with my wife yet, and my daughter, but I'm not sure if it comes here or not for her.
I don't doubt anyone who sits at this table would throw kids to the wolves. So I don't care what the vote ends up being, whether we are split or not. Just because you vote not to have masks doesn't mean I think that you don't care about kids or their safety. I don't know if you thought that, Darren?
Very much so. Yes.
So no, I don't think that. For me, I have to look myself in the mirror and not be pressured by who's sitting in the audience and being loudest. And I personally feel like the mitigation strategies we used last year, it would be irresponsible to pull those off with the numbers that we've got right now. That's okay if we disagree. And I don't feel like you don't love kids. I know you do. Otherwise you wouldn't be sitting in the seat. Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't think that this board vote, Chris, is going to help you a whole heck of a lot. But I think you are right to ask us to weigh in because you need the protection. This shouldn't just be your decision.
Well, look, no, the protection or not, I mean, I'm not going to I'll make a recommendation. I'm not gonna send it out and say, okay, board, what are you
No,
gonna do?
no.
You'll get a recommendation from me, and you may all reject it or accept it, but I'm gonna at least tell you what I think we should do.
Anybody else?
I have a question. Did last year, when the kids, or if they come back, have we looked in at all, even if we mask or don't mask, about staggering or different ways in the hallways and things to keep them 6 feet apart? Have we worked through all that too? Was that part of our plan?
So that was part of last year's plan, is that, grade levels staggered their release times. There were markings on floors, hallways were divided by tape for directional purposes, specific grade levels, structured at more than other grade levels, but there was an intent when the students were spaced as far apart as you can get with the number of students in that classroom. So, I mean, some classes had 26 students in it, so there's only so far apart you can get within a 4-wall room. And they did their best to make sure that there was space between kids at 6 feet, not always, but they did their best to put space between kids. But kids are kids, they're natural gravitators towards others, and they're mindful. I mean, they do, and you have to give them reminders and you should back up out of mind space and things like that. But I mean, those pieces were in place already.
All I can tell you that my experience mostly was at the high school, because that's where I was most of the time, was here in the high school. And watching students in the hallway, the hallways didn't look a lot different to me than they did any other year, in terms of what kids were, how they interacted with each other. Even though we had lighting and we had these different things, we had fewer kids. So it looked a little more spread out, but I think if we had every kid here, probably would have looked similar. And just like when you go in the store where people are supposed to be wearing masks, or if you go through the drive-thru wherever, the mask is right here, and you say to them, I'm sorry, but that's not how that works. You saw that kind of stuff quite a bit sometimes, and you have to, up here, right here, kids will, they do all that kind of stuff. So.
I would say the elementary was a lot. I mean, that typical,
Jen.
Students were cohorted by classroom. They ate breakfast and lunch with their own classroom. They were cohorted even at recess, so they didn't have to wear masks at recess, but they had to stay with their own classroom. So I mean, we literally had kids standing 6 feet apart from classrooms like, hi, from the same grade level, because they didn't mix at all. And so for the elementary, it was a lot different, but it wasn't just masks. I mean, it was mitigation measures layered upon layers. So it's the hand sanitizer every time they go in and out of the room. It was the wipes that kids wiped their desk with after they were done eating that were antiseptic or killed the germs as well as cleaned their desks. So it took away hand washing time. So there were so many things that we could do. Something that's really hard for elementary is, like Jamie said, kids gravitate towards each other. Oh my goodness. So, think about 5-year-olds. They didn't really mind wearing a mask. I mean, when they saw me, it was always, I felt like I was the mask police. But I'm not sure that still didn't stop them. When you're excited and you're 5, you're going to go and be next to your friend. I mean, so our teachers did an amazing job of keeping kids apart as much as possible. We had desks. I had teachers that were super creative and did tape around the student's desk, and that was their office, where they were, and they could stand in their office, they could sit in their office, and my teachers were super creative and did a great job But kids were still close together. When you have a large number of kids in a smaller room, even desks don't keep them, far enough apart.
And we are going to continue almost all the mitigation measures we did last year. There are a few that are more difficult because of teachers not having that time off on Wednesday, which means we have a little more trouble at lunchtime. But other than that, everything's going to be, except for what we decide to do with the masks. So.
Okay, this is the section of the meeting in which the public may make comments or share their opinions about Union City Community Schools. We ask you to limit your comments to no longer than 5 minutes per person to allow others the opportunity to speak. This is an opportunity for the board to listen to your concerns. It's not board practice to act on the concerns voiced during this meeting to allow for the board to do further research. Anybody want to make any public comments?
Thank you again for everything that you've discussed here tonight. I just have a couple of things that came to mind listening to you all speak. Number one, I have 7 kids, and I know the dollar amount that is to the district, and I would never threaten to pull my kids from here because this is my home. And I did not come here, I wasn't born here. I moved here as a freshman, and there was just something special about this place. My wedding was maroon and gray. My living room is maroon and gray. I tell everyone I bleed maroon and gray, and I do. This is the only place I ever want to be. So let me start with that. Second of all, nobody ever has pulled their kids from an elementary classroom because someone has a peanut allergy. And I'm telling you, that affects everybody in the room. When you have a kid with a peanut allergy, nobody else can touch a peanut. And I tell you what, when I was out on a cart, a couple times I had peanut M&Ms laying on there, and I would open the door and kids would go, "No peanuts!" And not one parent took their kid away because that kid couldn't have a peanut in the classroom just because they're used to having them. So consider that. I would love to hear from Lakeview that I know went virtual last year when everybody else made the decision to be in person. And I would like to know how the money was impacted in that district, how many students they lost, and I want to know, more importantly, how many students chose to be part of an elite school that made a tough call. How many parents chose to put their kids in Lakeview because above everybody else, they put safety of their staff and their students first. And I think we would be surprised. I want to say one more thing about money. Loss of life is more than money. Loss of life is more than education. So while I do know that kids being at home is not the answer, we all know that. Anyone in education knows that. But if we have a couple kids that leave, and they do virtual school and that's their parents' choice and they lose another year of education, it is different than losing the loss of your lungs. It is different than losing the loss of your life or the life of somebody that you love. And last, after listening to everything here, we cannot social distance in these buildings with no virtual option. So last year we had the masks and we had 3 to 6 feet of space. When you bring every student back in this district, those numbers go out the window. So the only safeguard we have left in our seats is this right here, because we will end up 2 to 3 feet apart. Now, I think there are solutions. As a teacher, I don't want to wear this. Kids can't see my face. And they say it all the time, it's not the same when I can't see all your facial expressions. I know they're in there, they're crazy, I'm insane. Okay, I get that. But reality is, if I can stand as a teacher at the front of my room, 8 feet apart, and do the majority of my teaching, and then put this on for every social interaction that I have with the little people in our world, I'll do it. I don't care. There are ways that we can have some breaks. We need to at least have masks in hallways, social settings. Maybe if they come off in seats, there are different things to do. Divide a classroom. Okay, here's the masks on the inside. Here's the non-maskers by the door. Their parents said no masks. Okay, you sit by the door where people come in and out. For the kids that need masks and the families that want their kids safe, let them sit on the interior of the room together. I think there's a lot that we can do. I believe in all of you. You're fantastic. Thank you.
I just had a couple more points in listening to everybody tonight. The comment about the grade point averages and the 4.0 and that didn't pass because there were losers. We don't mask our young people, there's losers. These children are adaptable. We all know they're a lot more adaptable than their parents. I've seen this firsthand in my job. They want to be with their friends. They're really good about wearing their masks and they get mask breaks. The other point is, folks want to say masks don't work. Our percentage of children who had to be re-screened for hearing tests was so minimal. Why? Because they weren't passing the germs. They didn't have the ear infections, the fluid in the ears. That's a fact. I learned that firsthand. And something a wise person told me, the right decision is not always the easiest decision. Please consider it.
Just real quick, I wanted to say, I would never say that I would pull my kids regardless of what decision you make, and I feel like people use that tactic, and it's getting to people. And I think it's a tactic, and I don't think it's the right thing to do, and that's why I would never threaten that. I just want to make that clear.
Okay. We are now at board roundtable, and just kind of a housekeeping comment. After board roundtable, we're going to move into closed session. After closed session, the only thing we are going to do is adjourn. So please don't feel like you need to stick around for another item after we go into closed session. Anybody have anything for board roundtable?
Can we consider a different date for the meeting where we decide how we're going to open school? Tuesday or a Wednesday or something instead of on Monday? I won't be back until probably the following week.
The next week is school.
Okay.
What did you say you will, when will you be, you'll be gone that whole week, the week of the 16th?
I'll be gone from the 14th on I guess a Saturday through the next Wednesday for sure. My brother and family will be here and I could go to a board meeting as early as probably, I don't know what time Wednesday I'll get here, Thursday.
I can't.
It's about as soon as I can make it.
Yeah, I can't make the 19th work. I can make the 18th work. That's a Wednesday. Can you guys make a Wednesday work or no? Okay.
Okay.
18th.
Wednesday. Chance I'll be back on
I do not want to have a board meeting on Friday.
Or if anybody else?
Yeah.
I can do Wednesday.
try. I mean, there's not other people that are involved in this besides me.
It may, so let's, how can we do this? Do we want to do a board email? See if people are available on the 18th, and you do some checking to see if you, why don't we do this? Why don't you see if you can get back on the 18th first? And if you can, then maybe we can send out a board email to see if other people are available on the 18th.
I can check.
Are you available on Wednesday? Okay, so Dave, I think we're just gonna do one of those. Thank you for always speaking your mind. I'm guessing you are gonna continue to do that. And then I hope that you'll share your thoughts with Chris. Chris will give a recommendation. I hope that you'll share your thoughts with Chris. If you would like to give something for one of us to read, I think one of us could read that. If you would, want to do that, you can call in.
Whatever you decide is fine with me. As far as speaking my mind, I know several people mentioned it. Yeah, I always just spoke my mind. And I say what's right, what I think is right. Sometimes I'm wrong and I get outvoted, and sometimes I'm not. The final thing I want to say to you is that I'm a pastor. I have no ill feelings towards you. We can disagree on an issue and still be really close friends. Yes, I disagree with you on your views on COVID-19, and you disagree with me on my views on COVID-19. However, that does not mean that we can't be real good friends and that we're mad at each other or anything, that you feel that I am attacking you. I'm talking about the issue only the issue. Anybody that knows me, who's in my classroom, knows that this is how Dave Mathis is. In school, for the union, with anything else there was, I always spoke my mind. Same thing in church. I will continue to speak my mind, but it doesn't mean that I'm mad at anybody because I speak my mind. Thank you.
So Dave, if you can call in that evening on the 16th, you can be part of the conversation. You just can't vote. So you do that whatever
I probably
way.
will not be available on that
Okay.
Monday, but you know, there's 6 of you. I don't think anybody here doesn't know my opinion. So,
I'm just giving you the opportunity to
and then if
continue
you
to share it.
you vote against what I want to do, I can always just blame you guys.
Okay, fair enough.
I think that's a good idea.
Fair enough. Any other comments from board roundtable?
A couple things. One, I never accused you of dating me or anything like that, so I appreciate your statement, but we can disagree and still.
Because we have a love fest going on. I
Oh
love
my
it.
goodness, you
We're
do.
gonna hug in the camera here in a minute, but that's one thing. Another thing, I know you don't typically respond to public comment, but one thing Jessica said that I agree with is people that try to pull their kids. When you asked my daughter, it was not that I want to pull her, but we have decided that would you go virtual or not? It would not be I'm leaving this town because I obviously have roots here and I spent most of my life here, and I'm on this board for a reason. So I'm not going to just willy-nilly throw down threats about my kids. It was just I wasn't ready for that question, and I'm not sure what I said, but my response is I don't know if shoot virtual or not would be the response I would give.
And your option being in the school district would be virtual. It wouldn't mean you're pulling your kids out. It would mean you're taking the options that are available. So, and you did say that, and I understood that.
I remember you said, would you pull your kid? And that's when
I just wanted to know, that's all. This was a question.
So, if my wife's listening, no, we have not made a decision on virtual or not.
I love you there.
Secondly, and this is about as far removed from anything that we've talked about tonight, but it was a committee of the whole meeting, and we typically talk about finances at times, and I was looking at the financial report from last year, and I had a question, believe it or not, about the DAO service, and if it was discontinued because it said we could save money if we did that, and I forgot to follow up on that. Do you know anything about the DAO service and if we have discontinued it? So we followed the recommendation to not use it. Wonderful. I can throw this piece of paper away. Thank you.
I have, go ahead.
I think we should celebrate what we can celebrate, and I think I've mentioned this before, but I think we should celebrate our new buses, and I don't know how to do that, if I need to call the paper or someone else does, but I think we should make that a highlight that we have 2 brand new buses for our students.
Not here. Yeah, I was gonna say we will when we actually get them. Yeah.
I will hold a live turkey in front of the bus.
I was gonna say, did you know something I don't know? I'm like,
Okay. I just don't want to forget about that because
we will not. Trust me, we will not.
I just have a follow-up question regarding where we're at as far as the security updates that we had talked about. It feels like a million years ago, but I know it was only a few months ago. Where are we at on that?
Those are still planned and will be installed, but it will be after school starts when the installation begins.
So I have a question. What about personnel that need to come be at the school to do certain tasks or whatever with students who are not employed by the school? I know we talked about the whole FOB situation. What's going to happen when we have ISD personnel that need to come in to do different types of work with students?
Well, the key fobs will only apply when you need to unlock the door. There's when there most of those personnel, or they actually do, will come in through the front door. And
Okay, so that would be the
we'll
same
still
as
allow
what
people
is
in.
still
As
that,
men.
so we would not, yes.
Yeah, it's just.
It will only affect people who normally would be given a key.
Gotcha.
And those people would not be.
Okay, thank you. We're gonna go into closed session to talk about the goals for the superintendent, but I wanna make sure that we keep on our radar board goals and district goals, and so we might wanna add that to our September committee meeting, and then our September action item. And I think it's really, we got into a little bit of an issue in that Rana's goals were the board goals, and that's not how it's supposed to work. Chris is gonna have Chris's goals that Chris is responsible for, and the board needs to have board goals that the board is responsible for, and those two should not conflict, obviously, but.
Not just the board responsible for the whole district.
So
What our goals are for the district.
we need to have that conversation. I just want to keep that on the radar. And then will you check into board training required for your evaluation? Because we had talked about different timelines, and if we decide that we're going to do a December evaluation process, there'll probably be 2 or 3, I think you might have gone through the board training. So there might just be 2 folks that need to go through, depending on the tool that you decide to use. I think, yes. Yeah. So would you just check into that and see who needs to do that? I thought I had one more, sorry. Say that again there? That's what I'm thinking. Okay, I think that's it. If anybody has anything else, great. If not, I'll entertain a motion to go into closed session. Thank you, and thank you. Discussion? Okay, all those in favor of going into closed session, please raise your hand. Dad? Okay, you guys have a great evening. Yeah, turn the camera on.